This video is brought to you by Skillshare. The first 1,000 people to go to the link in the description will get a month of Skillshare absolutely free. In 1948, Columbia Records introduced a new piece of technology that would change music forever: the long-playing record. These new vinyl discs had a crisper sound than the 10-inch shellac records that were standard at the time, and more importantly, they fit upwards of 20 minutes a side. Suddenly, a generation of musicians whose recordings had been limited to less than 5 minutes had the space to breathe and explore. One of the first artists to take advantage of this new format was the jazz legend Duke Ellington. In 1950, he recorded his first long-playing record, an album titled Masterpieces by Ellington. Rather than stuff his 20-minute sides full of songs, Ellington took the opportunity to stretch some of his most beloved songs out into sprawling concert arrangements. Masterpieces is an ambitious work that's aptly named. It's Duke Ellington proving that his name deserves to be spoken in the same breath as Bach, Mozart, Tchaikovsky. It's one of the most brilliant minds in music history, staking his claim on the title of the Great American Composer. Masterpieces opens on a stunning rendition of one of Duke Ellington's finest songs, Mood Indigo. The original version of Mood Indigo was an instrumental piece that went by the name Dreamy Blues. That piece was carried by a clarinet melody written and performed by Barney Bigard. Bigard had learned that melody in New Orleans from his clarinet teacher, Lorenzo Tio, who called it a Mexican blues. Ellington orchestrated around that clarinet melody, building in layers of trombone and trumpet. It was the first piece he'd ever written for microphone transmission, and he took into account the microphone tones that would be created by the distance between his horn sections. Dreamy Blues was an instant hit following its radio transmission. Audiences wrote in, flooding Ellington with adoring fan mail, so he got Irving Mills to write some lyrics to the song, and assembled his orchestra to cut some recordings. Those 1930s recordings were faster in tempo, more in keeping with the short length allowed by the recording technologies of the time. On Masterpieces, Ellington slowed the song down. He made it something sleazy and languid, and allowed his soloists to fly freely over a moseying bass line laid down by Wendell Marshall. This sort of longer, more elaborate piece might have been enabled by the technology of the day, but it was something Ellington had been dreaming of doing for years. In 1931, he wrote a piece called Creole Rhapsody, which stretched out to both sides of a 78 RPM record, much to the consternation of RCA Victor, who distributed it. 4 years later, Ellington tried his hand at another long piece, reminiscing in tempo, a beautiful elegy for his late mother. That song stretched out to 4 record sides and angered labels so much that they threatened to remove Ellington from their catalog. While the classical music of the era regularly stretched across a number of records, everyone at the time viewed Ellington and the entire jazz movement as lesser. Jazz was seen as mindless pop made to entertain the masses. This attitude can be seen in Theodore Adorno's infamous 1936 essay, On Jazz. In that piece, Adorno suggests that popular music, which included jazz, was only enjoyed by those who do not understand music as a language. Adorno's views were shared by many in the music intelligentsia, and they can't be removed from the realities of an America that was still deeply segregated. Jazz was a black form of expression, and because of that, it wasn't given the same lofty treatment as the white classical canon. But of course, Duke Ellington is every bit as good a composer as any one of the white greats, and nobody understood music as a language more than Duke Ellington. Masterpieces is living proof of that. As Mood Indigo progresses, Ellington strays from the more typical jazz forms and begins to experiment with cascading instrumental runs, punctuated with intricate horn arrangements. This dizzying array gives way to a virtuosic piano solo by Ellington himself, making full use of the richer tone depth allowed by the new recording technology. The first time Ellington truly got a chance to display the full scope of his genius was in 1943. The swing movement of the late 30s, led by Benny Goodman, had brought jazz into the white spotlight. In 1938, Goodman got called upon to play Carnegie Hall in a show that became legendary and finally helped draw some critical attention to jazz. Ellington was furious that Goodman was drawing the kind of praise that he had deserved for years, and in 1943 he finally got a chance to prove himself with his own Carnegie Hall concert. For that concert, Ellington composed a 45-minute piece called Black, Brown, and Beige. It was one of the most ambitious works of his entire career, a conceptual suite intending to portray the experiences of people of color in America. Ellington hoped that the piece might finally be able to convince critics that jazz was a truly great American art form. But tragically, white critics didn't understand Ellington's work, calling it outside of Ellington's camp. Composer Paul Bowles even called the piece formless and meaningless. Of course, the black jazz press at the time had a different take, recognizing it immediately as the masterpiece that it's now come to be seen as. All these pains and sorrows of the black experience are present in Ellington's music. In Mood Indigo, they're conveyed beautifully when the song finally reaches the vocal section. You ain't been blue, no, no, no. The stunning vocal delivery on Mood Indigo came courtesy of Eve Duke, who was credited on the album under the stage name of Yvonne Lenauzy. Mood Indigo. Her lilting vocals provide a new variation on the melodic themes that Ellington has been expanding upon throughout the song. Despite this incredible performance, Lenauzy was not actually a celebrated singer. In fact, her appearances on Masterpieces are some of the only recordings in her career. But Ellington knew exactly how to use her. He chose her in particular because of the way her vocal timbre imitated that of a saxophone. Since my baby said goodbye. Ellington always knew exactly how to get the most out of each and every one of his musicians. And that's because he didn't just see them as instruments. Ellington was a consummate gentleman and took the time to get to know each and every single member of his orchestra personally. That way he could compose parts around the personalities and the individual character quirks of his musicians, rather than just around the abstract sounds of their instruments. Ellington had synesthesia, so he even saw his musicians in individual colors. He described baritone saxophonist Harry Carney as sounding like a dark blue burlap, while Johnny Hodges' alto was a light blue satin. You ain't been blue. It's that human touch that's at the core of everything Duke Ellington does. Despite the fact that he played music for a country that wouldn't recognize his own humanity, Ellington made a lifelong quest of creating art that expressed the universal human experience. moments. That did sometimes mean tapping into pain and sorrow, but the masterpiece's version of Mood Indigo stretches beyond that too. The song is a kaleidoscopic piece, showing every corner of human emotion. Following the vocal section, Ellington brings Tyree Glenn's trombone to the forefront, creating a sexy sort of comic strut with the plunger mute. This section of the song is important because it unapologetically embraces jazz sound palettes. Where other moments of the song feel like they could be at home in grandiose classical halls, this section is a reminder of where Ellington came from, the smoky clubs of Harlem. When Ellington makes his case as the great American composer, he doesn't do it by abandoning his roots for some other standard. He does it by embracing them and showing the sheer versatility of jazz as an art form, the way that it can turn on a dime and mold itself to any sort of emotion or setting. With all of the different sounds that Ellington takes this version of Mood Indigo through, it can be easy to forget that nearly the entire piece is built around a single melodic idea. Ellington passes that idea through a dozen different tones and lets half of his orchestra run with it at varying points. But at its core, it's all just that Mexican blues that Barney Bigard picked up from his clarinet teacher. That idea shifts fluid through key and time, even appearing as a carnivalesque waltz 12 minutes in. Here, Ellington and his collaborator Billy Strayhorn experiment with a rich sort of dissonance. Ellington considered dissonance a fundamental aspect of jazz music because it was representative of the Black American experience. Black communities helped to build America and were essential in creating the country's unique cultural voice, but they were legally and culturally separated, pushed out and away from the supposedly harmonious American dream. Ellington was at his most defiant when challenged about his race. One of the best quotes of his career came in response to someone who asked him about making music for his people. "My people," Ellington said. "Which of my people? I'm in several groups, you know. I'm in the group of piano players. I'm in the group of listeners. I'm in the group of general appreciation of music. Of course I've had such a strong influence by the music of the people, rather than my people, because the people are my people." Mood Indigo is a musical statement to that same effect. It's a piece that takes one of Ellington's biggest, most accessible pop hits and elevates it to one of the great pieces of art that all people from all walks of life can celebrate. And yet neither Mood Indigo nor the Masterpieces album got nearly the love and credit they deserved when they released in 1951. Likely, this was a technological reality. Long-playing records spun at a different speed, and so they required different equipment that not everybody had. Furthermore, the album was released in the middle of a slump of Ellington's career. Post-war America had fallen in love with crooners, and big bands were folding across the country. But Ellington and his orchestra refused to quit, and in 1956, they got a break, when they performed at the Newport Jazz Festival. Duke Ellington's music stirred the crowd into a near frenzy. The performance made headlines across the world and even landed Ellington on the cover of Time magazine. And finally, late in his career, the entire music world started to see and celebrate Ellington for what he was. Not just a leader in pop music, not just an innovative composer and virtuoso piano player, but one of the most singular, most visionary minds in the entirety of music history. This video was made possible thanks to Skillshare, the online learning platform that can help you take your personal or professional goals to the next level. If you've ever been curious about trying out the kind of motion design that I do, you should check out Philip D'Amico's class on 2D motion graphics in After Effects. Philip is a good friend and the mind behind the channel Volksgeist. He uses the same software and techniques that I do to make his videos. If you want to check it out, you can do so at no cost to yourself. The first 1,000 people to go to the link in the description will get a 30-day free trial of Skillshare. So once you've checked out Philip's class, you can try Danielle Creasa's Creative Breakthrough, 8 exercises to power your creativity, confidence, and career. And there's countless more classes where that came from, so why not give it a shot? Again, you can get started at no cost to yourself today if you just go to the link in the description. That also shows Skillshare that I sent you, which is a great way of helping support my channel. And hey, thanks for watching.